In July of 1715, Havana's harbor groaned under the weight of a fortune. 6 Spanish treasure galleons escorted by armed vessels prepared to depart for Spain. Inside their holds lay gold and silver from the mines of Mexico and Peru, emeralds cut in the colonies and pearls that shimmered like frozen tears. The shipment was said to be the richest convoy the crown had ever risked at sea. Crowds filled the docks to watch. Wives held children up for one last glimpse of their fathers. Mothers pressed rosaries into their sons' palms. Soldiers stood guard, their eyes fixed on chests stacked higher than men, knowing that each one held more wealth than an ordinary life would ever touch. The air smelled of pitch, sweat, and salt, and beneath it all was a sense of unease. Because everyone knew the hurricane season had already begun. Imagine if this happened in your time. A fleet of cargo ships carrying billions vanishes in a single night, without a trace of its crew or cargo. Would you blame nature, human greed, or something else entirely? If this happened in your town, what would you believe? Comment your country below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Because the deeper we go, the stranger the story becomes. This is not only about lost treasure. It's about lives erased, mysteries unclaimed, and the silence left behind. Tonight you will walk their path. You see it first as sound. The harbor is alive with shouting, with the hammer of hammers, with the scrape of barrels against stone. Havana in the summer is already unbearable, but this is fever. 6 galleons wait, their masts clawing upward like bare trees, their shadows stretching long across the water. Families cluster at the docks. Some cry openly, others are stiff with pride, as if pride could keep a storm from claiming their sons. You can feel the wealth in the air. Gold doubloons packed tight into crates, silver bars stacked with military precision, pearls strung into ropes, emeralds wrapped in cloth so fine it seems to glow even before the lids are shut. The sound of chains tightening on strongboxes is louder than prayers. This isn't only cargo, it is a nation's lifeblood packed into 6 wooden hulls. And everyone knows it, sailors are nervous. They drink too much the night before departure, making promises they know they can't keep. A drummer boy clutches his sticks as if holding them will make him invincible. A carpenter whispers to his wife not to open the locket he gives her unless he fails to return. The air is heavy, and beneath the excitement there is dread. Because the sea always takes its price, the anchors lift. The ships move. At first it seems almost calm. The sails snap, the convoy forms its line, and the horizon swallows Havana. Men relax, even laugh. They have survived storms before. They have outsailed pirates. What could be worse than what they already know? But the horizon carries whispers. Fishermen mutter that the winds are strange. The gulls that usually follow vanish after the first day. At dusk the sky bruises too quickly. Clouds rising like towers, and the air tastes metallic. Seasoned sailors feel it in their bones the way old wounds ache before the rain. Something is building, and then it arrives. The storm tears through without warning. Rain lashes the decks in blinding sheets. Waves climb higher than the masts. Thunder splits the sky into pieces. Lantern signals vanish. Gunshots used to keep formation echo into nothing. The convoy is blind. Below decks, men fight the sea itself. Barrels smash loose, crushing bodies in the dark. Treasure shifts like a living thing, groaning against the hull. Water pours in, unstoppable, seeping through every seam. Above, ropes snap and whip like serpents, ripping flesh as easily as cloth. Orders are shouted, lost, repeated, swallowed whole by the roar, and then silence, unnatural, absolute. The storm breaks, but the fleet is gone. By dawn, the Florida coast should have been littered with wreckage. There should have been broken spars, floating barrels, survivors crawling through the surf. But the beaches are nearly empty. A few bodies, a few splinters, a chest half buried in sand with its contents already stolen. The rest, the ships, the men, the treasure, are nowhere. It is as if the sea has taken them whole. Word spreads fast. Spain demands answers. Divers are sent, salvagers hired. Weeks turn into months. The sea gives back only fragments. A single anchor, a handful of coins, a carved saint torn from a bow. Enough to prove the disaster was real, not enough to explain it. And that is when the rumors begin. Some say 1 or 2 ships made it into a hidden cove before the storm struck, treasure unloaded in secret. Others whisper that men on the inside knew what was coming, that the hurricane was not simply weather but opportunity. Still others insist something darker traveled with the fleet, something forbidden, something that demanded silence. The whispers grow louder because the truth is absent. Families beg for names to write on graves, but the lists are incomplete. Ledgers are vague. Officials avoid questions. In taverns, men lower their voices when they speak of it. Divers vanish trying to find wrecks. Every new rumor feeds the old. And centuries later, the mystery only deepens. Coins appear in the hands of beachcombers, glinting like bait in the sun. A jeweled cross is pulled from the sand, its gold darkened but unbroken. A cannon encrusted with coral is hauled up by fishermen, but always the same problem. Fragments without answers. Proof without explanation. The sea gives enough to keep hope alive, but never enough to satisfy it. And you begin to wonder, was this disaster only a storm? Or was it something more deliberate? The question lingers even now because history is full of storms. But history is not full of fleets that vanish almost without a trace. And just when the story feels complete, you realize something darker waits below the surface. The treasure was real. The men were real. The storm was real. But the silence afterward, that is what refuses to fade. The sea still holds its secret. And as you stand on the same shore where families once searched the horizon for sails that never returned, you feel the truth pressed down like the weight of water. Something was taken that night. Not just treasure, not just lives. Something else, and the sea has never given it back. Dawn comes gray, heavy, and wrong. You stand on a Florida beach where the sand is still soaked with storm surge. The palms are stripped bare, their fronds scattered like broken fingers. The sky is too calm, too clean, as if the hurricane had burned itself out in a single night of violence and then left nothing behind but silence. And in that silence you hear it. The crackle of waves pulling something unnatural from the deep. At first it is only driftwood, planks and splinters too jagged to be ordinary. Then you notice the edges blackened, the seams marked with iron nails shaped by Spanish forges, pieces of a ship ripped apart, arriving one fragment at a time. They should be countless. They should litter the shore, but they do not. What washes up is sparse, as if most of the wreckage had been claimed by something deeper than the storm. The first bodies arrive hours later. A fisherman finds them at the mouth of a river, tangled in reeds, eyes open and blind. Their hands are clenched around nothing. Their clothes are in rags, torn not only by the sea but by something sharper. Reef stone perhaps, or something worse. 3 men, no more, out of nearly 1,000 souls. By the second day, word spreads inland. Settlers, missionaries, and native guides follow the shoreline, searching for survivors, for anything that can prove the fleet's fate. They find a half-sunken boat, its oars splintered, its hull cracked. They find a single chest, its lid warped, its contents already plundered before officials can arrive. And they find silence, too much silence. Because when 6 ships vanish, there should be wreckage everywhere. There should be hundreds of bodies. Instead, there are scraps, whispers, fragments that do not add up. You imagine being one of those families waiting in Havana. You picture the governor's couriers riding hard into the city, their faces pale, their clothes still damp. They deliver words that no one wants to believe. The convoy is gone. 6 ships lost to the storm. Nearly 1,000 men drowned. Treasure scattered, unrecoverable. It is a report too neat, too simple, written to calm the crown, not to comfort the living. Yet the truth does not match the paper. Because men still whisper that lights were seen offshore after the storm ended. Lanterns burning low, sails half torn, ships limping into hidden coves. Others swear they saw armed boats rowing at night carrying chests away under moonlight. And a few claim something else entirely. That the sea itself opened and pulled the galleons under, whole, as if swallowing them into a cavern where no storm could reach. And just when you think the story is only about treasure, you realize it is also about fear. The Crown dispatches divers to investigate. They work with crude helmets, weighted lines, and lungs of iron. Some surface with nothing but coral cuts across their skin. Others refuse to go down again, muttering of shadows moving against the current. A handful bring back evidence. Coins gleaming against the sand, a broken cannon, a carved figurehead with its face eroded into a hollow mask. But there is never enough to match the scale of the disaster. Still, the mystery does not fade, because survivors are rumored to exist. In the weeks that follow, settlers speak of 3 half-dead men stumbling into a Franciscan mission south of present-day Vero Beach. They are too weak to explain what happened. One dies within a day, clutching a chain with a small key still hanging from it. The second mutters about a ship breaking in two, about water rising too fast, about men screaming in the dark. The third says nothing at all. He stares at the wall, lips cracked, eyes hollow. And when asked what he saw, he only whispers one word: below. Imagine hearing that. In a world where storms are supposed to kill men with fury, not drag them silently downward, what would you believe? Would you dismiss it as madness or fear it as truth? Officials take the key, hiding it in the governor's strong room. They write the survivors' names into ledgers, but the ink is blurred, the details vague. The bodies are buried without ceremony, and the rumors only grow stronger. Whispers circulate in taverns and missions in the governor's own courtyard. Some claim the treasure had been cursed long before it was loaded onto the galleons, that it included relics never meant to be moved, objects pulled from temples in the New World that carried not just value, but vengeance. Others say the fleet was betrayed, that secret orders instructed one ship to carry a different kind of cargo entirely, and that the storm was not accident but punishment. And still, the sea keeps its silence. Centuries later, scavengers will comb the same beaches. They will find coins glinting in the surf, jewelry hardened by salt, relics clinging to coral. Each discovery will reignite the mystery, each fragment proof of what was lost but never explanation enough. The story becomes not only a maritime disaster but a haunting, because when a fleet worth kingdoms vanishes almost without trace, people do not let it go. They fill the silence with theories, with curses, with stories darker than any storm. And just when it seems the past is settled, something always pulls you back. Because one truth remains: the sea does not surrender everything. It leaves tokens, crumbs, fragments to lure the living closer. And the deeper men dive, the more they wonder, not only where the treasure lies, but what else might be waiting beside it. The Florida coast looks calm now, a paradise of sunlight and surf. But beneath, in caverns carved by centuries, lies something no hurricane alone could explain. And tonight, as you imagine the storm breaking, the lanterns vanishing, and the silence that followed, you realize the most terrifying part is not that the ships went down. It is that so little ever came back. You begin with the sound of digging. The storm has passed, the beaches are quiet, and yet men claw through sand with hands raw from salt and fear. Spanish officials stand at the edge, cloaks heavy despite the heat, eyes fixed on the horizon as though the missing fleet might still appear. But what they have instead are fragments. Coins scattered like baitfish in the surf, a carved saint broken from a ship's bow, a rosary tangled in kelp. Small things, too small compared to what should have been. You imagine standing among them, bent to the shore, sifting sand that clings to wet skin. You lift a coin. It shines dully in the morning light, stamped with the mark of New Spain. It proves the convoy was real, but it explains nothing. 6 ships carried fortunes enough to bankrupt or empower nations, and all that comes back to you is a single silver disc. Still, the governor orders the search to continue. Salvagers row out in crude boats, dragging hooks along the reefs, listening with practiced hands for the scrape of metal against coral. Divers tie stones to their waists and plunge into the deep, lungs burning, ears straining against the pressure. They come back gasping, sometimes with coins, sometimes with nothing, and sometimes they do not come back at all. Those who surface alive whisper of shadows that move against the current, of dark caverns yawning beneath the reefs, of sudden cold that feels less like water and more like a breath. They cross themselves before speaking, and even then their words carry no conviction. Because how do you describe something you barely survive? And yet stories multiply. Some say the fleet had been cursed from the moment it left Havana, that relics stolen from temples in Mexico and Peru had been hidden in the holds, relics never meant to cross the sea. Others insist one of the galleons carried secret cargo for the crown, sealed in a compartment known only to captains and royal officials. A few go further still. The ships were not destroyed by storm at all, but taken, pulled downward whole, swallowed by something beneath the surface that is older than empires and hungrier than any pirate. What makes the rumors dangerous is not their strangeness. It is how quickly they spread, because survivors exist. A Franciscan mission records 3 men who staggered ashore south of present-day Vero Beach, half dead, eyes hollow. One muttered of water rushing in faster than men could pray. Another swore he saw lanterns burning offshore long after the storm ended, as if a ship had survived and then vanished by choice. The third said nothing for days, then whispered a single word: below. Officials confiscate their belongings: a rusted knife, a strip of cloth torn from a sail, and a key. The key is unusual, too finely cut, too heavy for an ordinary lock. Its bow bears the faint impression of a crown. It is sealed away, noted in ledgers, and then forgotten in ink but not in whispers, because men understand gold. They understand silver. But a key with no lock, that is something else. And just when you think the story is about treasure, you realize it is about silence. The Spanish crown wants answers, but answers are scarce. Reports pile up with contradictions. One claims all 6 ships broke apart on the reefs, another insists 2 slipped away. Another blames pirates who followed the convoy like sharks. None of them fit the evidence. Families in Havana beg for names, for details, for graves. They are given numbers, lists of cargo, promises of investigation. The words ring hollow. Meanwhile, the shore tells a different story. Children find coins in tidal pools. Fishermen pull up coral-encrusted jewelry in their nets. A carved crucifix washes up, its face smoothed by sand. The finds are small, but they spread like sparks. Every discovery becomes proof that the rest is still out there waiting. Men who once prayed for souls now pray for chests. Salvagers arrive from other islands, their boats heavy with greed. And yet for every coin found, something else is lost. Divers vanish without explanation. A salvager rows out one morning and is never seen again. A priest tasked with blessing the dead writes in his journal that he dreamed of a room without windows filled with water, where voices whispered in languages he did not know. He dies within the week, feverish, his last words warning that the sea remembers. Still, the truth hasn't surfaced. By late summer, the beaches are scarred by digging, the waters clouded with sand. The Spanish governor demands order, but men do not obey when gold glitters at their feet. The crown sends guards, soldiers with muskets who fire warning shots to keep scavengers at bay. But the sea does not stop giving fragments. And each fragment is another reason to believe the rest lies just beyond reach. You imagine yourself walking those same beaches centuries later, You kneel, brush aside sand, and there it is, a coin, a ring, a fragment of chain. Proof of a disaster, but never its explanation. Enough to feed the mystery, not enough to end it. And just when you think the sea is empty, it surprises you again. One autumn morning, after weeks of nothing, a fisherman drags his net ashore and finds inside not fish, not coral, but a fragment of wood carved with marks too deliberate to be random. The symbols are faint, worn, almost erased. They do not match Spanish script. They do not match native carvings. The fisherman refuses to keep it. He takes it to the mission, where the friars argue whether it is pagan, accidental, or something else entirely. The wood is sealed away, and with it a new layer of fear takes root, because if the fleet carried more than treasure, what else sank with it? The Spanish crown never gets its answer. Centuries will pass, coins will be found, artifacts unearthed, fortunes made by men who stumble across wrecks, but the mystery will remain, growing larger than the treasure itself. And as you stand at the edge of that history, listening to the waves crash against the same coast that once swallowed 6 ships, you realize the silence is not an absence. It is a presence, a weight, a reminder that something waits below, untouched, unseen, and perhaps unwilling to ever return. The question is not only where the treasure lies, it is what else lies with it. And the sea, as always, refuses to answer. You begin with the sound of soldiers' boots on wet sand. Weeks have passed since the hurricane, and the Florida coast is no longer silent. It is crowded with men in uniforms faded by salt, officials clutching ledgers and salvagers from every corner of the Caribbean. The beaches, once stripped bare by storm, now bristle with tents, muskets, and banners marked with the seal of Spain. The Crown has decided the lost treasure must be found at any cost. You can almost smell the air. Gunpowder, sweat, the metallic tang of coins pulled from salt water. Soldiers patrol the dunes, muskets slung, warning scavengers to keep their distance. But the scavengers never truly leave. They linger at the edges, watching, waiting for their chance. Because word has spread. Gold has already washed ashore. Coins glint in tidal pools. A jeweled cross was found by a boy walking barefoot. For every soldier hunting officially, there are 10 men ready to steal. The Spanish officials keep their records tight. Each artifact recovered is counted, logged, sealed. But you know how easily numbers can be bent. One coin goes into a chest, another disappears into a pocket. The governor rages, demands order, but greed is stronger than discipline. And then come the divers. They are not like modern divers with tanks and gauges. They are men who tie stones to their waists, press knives between their teeth, and plunge into the sea with lungs full of faith. Their bodies cut through the surf, vanishing into blue that quickly turns black. A line around their chest is the only lifeline, tugged by hands above. They are the Crown's best chance to find what the storm has stolen. Some surface triumphantly. They gasp, spit salt water, and hold up coins, rings, fragments of wood. Others surface shaking, refusing to speak of what they felt below. And some never surface at all. You imagine standing on the deck of a small boat, rope burning in your palms as you wait for the diver's signal. A single tug, all is well. 2 tugs, pull me up. 3 tugs, danger. But sometimes there is nothing. The rope drifts slack. Minutes stretch into forever. And when the men finally haul it back, the line comes up empty. The sea takes more than it gives. And just when the search seems hopeless, something shifts. One diver emerges clutching a length of timber marked with iron nails and a faint carving, a fragment of a galleon's hull. Another brings up a rosary still wrapped around skeletal fingers. The officials take them as proof. The ships broke apart here on these reefs. But the divers whisper differently. They speak of caverns beneath the waves, places where the current drags downward, places where the wreckage is not scattered but hidden. One swears he saw an entire mast lodged upright in the dark, as though the ship had sunk not in pieces but whole. What do you believe? That the storm tore them apart or that something else pulled them down intact? The Crown orders maps drawn, soundings taken. Boats circle the reefs, measuring depth with weighted lines. The reports are strange. In some places, the bottom is shallow, no more than a dozen fathoms. In others, the line sinks and sinks, never finding ground, as if the sea itself has pockets, mouths waiting to swallow anything that drifts too close, and still, the truth does not surface. The locals, native guides who have lived on this coast longer than Spain has ruled it, refuse to dive in certain waters. They call them cursed, pointing to spots where the current runs cold and silent even in midday sun. They tell stories of spirits who live below, spirits angered when men take what does not belong to them. Spanish officials dismiss these warnings as superstition, but the divers grow uneasy, because sometimes superstition describes what science has not yet named. Rumors spread inland. Settlers whisper of strange lights offshore at night, as if lanterns still burn beneath the waves. Others claim they hear bells tolling from the deep, the bells of ships that should be shattered, ringing in water thick as glass. Each story adds to the unease. Because treasure can be counted, fear cannot. And then a discovery changes everything. A diver surfaces clutching not coins, not wood, but a key, heavy, ornate, stamped with the faint outline of a crown. Its grooves are too precise for an ordinary chest. Officials examine it, whisper among themselves, and then lock it away. The governor claims it belongs to a captain's cabin, but the divers know better. They have seen chest keys. This is something else, something meant for a lock far larger, far stranger. The whispers intensify. What if the fleet carried more than treasure? What if the storm did not simply destroy but reveal? You picture the beaches at dusk. Soldiers huddled around fires, divers sharpening knives they will never use. In the distance, the surf crashes with the same rhythm it always has, but now it sounds different. Heavier, like a heartbeat underwater. Some men pray louder. Others drink until their fear turns silent. The governor promises the treasure will be recovered, but no one sleeps easily. And just when you think the fear has reached its limit, something happens that no ledger can record. A boat returns with only 2 men out of 5. Their eyes are wide, their hands shaking, their words tangled. They speak of a cavern that pulled at them, of currents so strong it felt like hands dragging them down. One swears he saw a door, iron, impossible, half buried in coral. The other shakes his head, refusing to confirm, refusing to deny. They both beg never to be sent down again. The officials laugh it off, calling it delirium. But the divers believe, and belief spreads faster than gold. The Spanish crown will eventually recover fragments of its fortune. Chests will be lifted, coins will be melted back into circulation. But the men who dove that summer carry something heavier than gold. They carry the memory of shadows below, of currents that feel alive, of places where the sea does not simply drown, it keeps. And as you stand at the edge of that history, imagining the lanterns vanishing into storm, the divers disappearing into black water, the unanswered questions multiplying, you feel the silence of the deep pressing in, because treasure is not the only thing that sinks. Sometimes the truth goes with it. You begin not with the sea but with paper. The governor's office in Havana is cluttered with ledgers stacked higher than the windows, ink drying in the heat. Officials bend over desks, quills scratching, recording names that feel more like numbers. 1,000 men were aboard the convoy, but already the lists are uneven. Some names are repeated, others missing. Captains are recorded, officers too. But common sailors blur into lines of ink that fade almost as soon as they are written. Families gather outside the courtyard, desperate for news. They ask the same questions again and again. Which ship? Which man? Which grave? And the answers never satisfy. You imagine being among them. A mother gripping a rosary until the beads cut into her skin. A wife clutching a child who doesn't yet understand why his father won't return. A brother shouting at a clerk until soldiers push him back into the crowd. The governor speaks of treasure, of recovery of the crown's wealth. But no one cares about coins in that moment. They care about names. They care about faces, and those are the things the storm swallowed first. Meanwhile, along the Florida coast, survivors of another kind begin to appear. Not men, but objects. Objects that carry stories heavier than any official report. A carved crucifix, its edges splintered, pulled from sand by a settler's child. A shoe, leather cracked with the imprint of its owner's foot still visible. A locket opened to reveal a curl of hair, tangled and dark, still clinging to the clasp. These things are carried inland, shown in missions and churches, held up as relics of tragedy. And just when you think the story is only about grief, another layer surfaces, because not all who search the shore do so for mourning. Some arrive with shovels, some with knives, some with quiet arrangements made in taverns miles from the coast. Smugglers drift in at night, their boats low in the water, eyes sharp for soldiers' lanterns. They know the sea has given up fragments, coins, jewelry, sometimes whole chests thrown ashore like offerings. They believe more is waiting, and they are not wrong. The Spanish soldiers patrol, firing muskets into the air to scatter scavengers, but greed never truly leaves. In the dark, men dig in silence, covering their tracks with wet sand, hiding coins in their mouths so the clink won't betray them. A few are caught. A few vanish before they can be. Whispers grow that the wrecks are not just dangerous because of soldiers or storms, but because something else protects them. You hear stories told by the native people of the coast. They speak of waters where spirits live, angry at the intrusion of foreign ships. They warn that the storm was not chance but consequence. They point to the caverns below the reefs, to the cold currents that tug downward even on calm days, and call them mouths. Mouths that do not release what they consume. The Spaniards laugh at these tales, but their divers grow pale when they hear them. Because superstition, when it aligns with experience, feels less like myth and more like warning. Still, the search does not stop. Divers continue to plunge, lungs burning, bodies aching. Some bring up coins by the handful, pressed into the hands of officials who write hurried notes and lock them in chests. Others bring up stranger things. A piece of sailcloth coated in black tar, marked faintly with a symbol no one can explain. A chain so heavy it takes 3 men to drag it ashore, its links twisted as if bent by force beyond storm or tide. Each discovery deepens the mystery rather than resolving it. And just when officials try to calm the chaos, the church intervenes. The Franciscan friars declare the wreckage sacred ground. They demand that relics be given to the mission for safekeeping, not melted down or stolen. They speak of dreams, visions of rooms without windows, of stars moving in patterns not of the sky, of bells tolling underwater. Their sermons frighten the settlers more than the storm itself. Soldiers are ordered to keep them quiet, but whispers spread faster than muskets can silence. Meanwhile, the governor writes to Madrid. His letters are formal, but beneath the ink bleeds panic. He reports that some treasure has been recovered, but much remains missing. He warns of smugglers, of scavengers, of unrest. He does not mention the dreams. He does not mention the symbols. Some truths are too dangerous to send across the sea. You imagine reading one of those letters centuries later. The parchment brittle, the ink faded. You trace the words with your finger and realize how much is missing, how much was never written at all. And then comes a moment that shifts the story entirely. One evening, a diver surfaces clutching something no one expects. A wooden box swollen with water but intact. Inside are not coins or jewels but documents. Pages smeared by the sea, ink blurred but still legible in fragments. They speak not only of cargo but of schedules, secret transfers, coded marks, instructions to move items from one hull to another in the dead of night. The word transit appears again and again. Alongside it, sketches of a circle crossed by a line, the same mark the friars whispered about, the same symbol seen on the fragment of sailcloth. The documents are seized, locked away. Officials forbid mention of them, but the divers who saw them cannot forget. And still the sea does not yield its whole truth. By autumn, storms return. Salvage slows, soldiers grow restless. Families stop asking for names and begin asking only for closure. But closure does not come. The ledgers remain incomplete. The treasure remains scattered. The rumors remain louder than the facts. And as the months pass, a different fear takes root. Not of storms, not of smugglers, but of silence. Because silence can be more dangerous than noise. Silence allows imagination to fill the gaps, and imagination, when paired with grief, creates legends. You stand on the beach at dusk, waves licking the shore. The air is calm, almost too calm. Somewhere beneath the surface, in caverns no man has fully mapped, the truth still waits. And you realize the most haunting part is not what was lost, but what might still be hidden. The galleons carried more than gold. They carried secrets. And secrets have a way of refusing to stay buried. You begin with the quiet of passing years. The storm has ended, the soldiers have left, and yet the Florida coast is never truly empty. Men keep arriving long after the governor's reports have faded into the archives of Madrid. They come with small boats, crude maps, and stories of coins found by fishermen or relics washed into tidal pools. Each one believes the same thing. That the treasure still waits just beneath the surface, waiting for the right hands to claim it. You imagine being one of them, rowing out before dawn, the horizon still purple, the air heavy with salt. You drop a weighted line into the sea and listen with your fingers for the scrape of metal. The water beneath is black, restless, full of secrets. Each time the rope trembles, your heart hammers, until you pull it up and find only stone. Still you try again, because hope when tied to gold is harder to drown than men. Decades pass, but the rumors never fade. In taverns across the Caribbean, men trade stories of coins stamped with the year 1715, found in places far from Florida. How could they have drifted so far? Were they carried by currents or by hands that knew exactly where to sell them? The questions matter less than the promise. If coins exist, the chests that held them must still be out there. And then, darker stories emerge. Some divers vanish without explanation. They row out and never return. Others are found washed ashore, faces pale, lungs filled not only with water but with sand, as if they drowned below and were forced upward by something unseen. Survivors whisper of caverns that pull at them, of tunnels so dark their torches flicker and die. Of doors in stone that feel carved, not natural. They return trembling, vowing never to dive again. What would you believe? That the sea is dangerous, or that something more deliberate waits below? The church grows uneasy. Priests warn against disturbing the wrecks, declaring them cursed. They tell of dreams that spread like infection among divers, visions of bells tolling underwater, of voices chanting in languages never spoken on land. A friar records one dream in his journal, a fleet sailing not across the surface but beneath it, lanterns glowing in eternal darkness. He burns the pages the next morning, but copies of his words survive, whispered from mission to mission, and still, the search continues. Smugglers begin to control the beaches. They watch for soldiers, wait for storms, and claim whatever the sea gives back. Coins disappear into hidden markets. Rings are traded in secret. Their gems reset so no one recognizes their origin. The Spanish crown complains but cannot stop it. Florida is too far, too wild, too dangerous. And greed always finds a way. Yet not every seeker comes for wealth. Some come for truth. In the late 18th century, a cartographer named Valdez travels to the coast. He claims he wants to chart the reefs, but his journals tell another story. He writes of finding iron rings embedded in coral, Too perfect to be natural, he sketches outlines of caverns, noting strange currents that flow upward instead of down. One entry reads, "There is a place where the water breathes." He dies before completing his map, and his papers vanish into private hands. And just when you think the mystery has gone quiet, it stirs again, because storms return every season, and every season the sea gives back another fragment. A crucifix here, a musket there, a handful of coins that gleam like lures in the sand. Each find reignites the legend, each fragment proof that the rest is still waiting. Families pass down stories like heirlooms. Children grow up hearing of ships swallowed whole, of treasure that sings beneath the waves, of men who vanish chasing it. And then, in the 19th century, a fisherman finds something no one expects. A chain, thick as a man's wrist, encrusted with coral. When cleaned, it reveals links twisted as if by immense pressure. Attached to it is a plate of hammered lead, stamped with a number and a crown. Scholars debate whether it belonged to a ship's anchor or something else entirely. The chain disappears into a collector's vault. The questions remain. What if the fleet did not scatter? What if it did not break apart? What if something else holds it intact below, untouched? By the 20th century, technology begins to catch up with rumor. Divers use air tanks, sonar, and lights that pierce deeper than lungs alone ever could. Expeditions are launched, funded by governments, universities, and private collectors. They map the seabed, scan the reefs, and bring up artifacts in quantities never seen before. Coins spill across tables.
Gold chains are measured in feet.
A golden cross is displayed in a museum, glittering under artificial light. For a moment it feels as though the truth is finally within reach. But the deeper they go, the stranger it becomes. Some divers report sudden drops in temperature, even when gauges show no change. Lights flicker as if drained by unseen currents. Sonar returns shapes that look like walls, arches, structures too regular for coral. Photographs blur at the edges, showing outlines that vanish when examined too closely. One diver claims to have touched stone, smooth, deliberate, a doorway half buried in sand. His team dismisses it as imagination, but his eyes never lose their fear. Still, the treasure flows. Gold floods markets, museums, and private collections. Fortunes are made, but alongside the riches, the mystery grows darker. Because no matter how much is recovered, the central question remains unanswered. How could 6 ships vanish almost completely, leaving so little behind compared to what they carried? Why does the sea yield fragments but never the whole? And just when modern certainty seems ready to dismiss the legend, another story surfaces. A diver working off the Florida coast in the 1960s records in his log that he followed a narrow passage through coral into a cavern unlike any he had ever seen. The walls were smooth. The water was still. At the center stood what he swore was the remains of a mast, upright, intact, as if a ship had been swallowed whole. He surfaced shaken, but when he returned with a team, the passage was gone. Collapsed, shifted, erased. His logbook survives. His evidence does not. What do you believe? That he hallucinated, or that he glimpsed the truth the sea never wanted to reveal? Even now the legend persists. Coins still wash ashore after storms. Divers still chase shadows in the reefs. The treasure continues to surface in fragments, never in full. And beneath it all, the silence of the deep remains. Because the fleet of 1715 is not only a story of lost gold, it is a story of lives erased, of mysteries protected, of truths that refuse to rise. And as you imagine the lanterns vanishing, the storm roaring, the silence that followed, you realize the most haunting part. The sea has not finished speaking, it is only waiting. You begin in the glow of electric light, not lantern flame. It is the mid-20th century, and divers wear rubber suits, masks pressed tight, tanks strapped to their backs. For the first time since 1715, men can stay below long enough to truly see what the sea has hidden. The Florida coast, once whispered about in fear, becomes a frontier of exploration. Expeditions arrive with boats outfitted not for fishing but for discovery. Their maps are precise. Their equipment hums with modern confidence. They believe they will solve in months what centuries of rumor could not. You imagine being on one of those boats. The sun beats down, radios crackle, sonar sweeps the depths. The screen shows faint shadows, outlines that might be wreckage or might be coral. A diver rolls backward into the sea, bubbles streaming upward, light cutting through green water. For the first time, human eyes descend not just for seconds, but for minutes, even hours. And the sea does not disappoint. Gold spills upward, chains measured in feet, coins glittering in nets by the thousands, a golden cross taller than a man, hauled into daylight after 2 centuries below. Newspapers call it the treasure of the century. Investors celebrate. Museums prepare displays. The legend of the 1715 fleet becomes more than whispers. It becomes spectacle. But the spectacle hides the silence. Because even as artifacts fill tables, the central questions remain. Why do the wrecks appear in fragments, scattered, incomplete? Why do divers report finding whole sections of ships one day, only to lose them the next? Why does the sea still yield enough to prove its wealth but never enough to empty its secret? Some divers begin to keep private journals. They write not of coins or chains but of cold pockets of water, of shadows that move against the current, of structures too regular to be natural. One sketch shows an arch of stone deep beneath the reef, carved with marks blurred by time. Another entry describes a sound, low, rhythmic like bells tolling far away. These notes never make it into official reports. They remain hidden in logbooks passed quietly from one diver to another. And just when modern certainty should erase the legend, the mystery deepens. In the 1980s, sonar scans reveal anomalies, shapes too symmetrical to dismiss. Teams dive, cameras rolling only to find rubble, coral, sand. But the anomalies return, appearing and disappearing as if the sea itself rearranges its secrets. A handful of divers claim they saw more. Timbers lodged upright, a mast still standing, the outline of a hull resting whole. They surface, shaken, swearing they touched history intact. Yet when others search, they find nothing. What would you believe? That the wrecks shift with the currents or that something else is moving them? Meanwhile, storms continue their cycle. Each hurricane churns the sea, and with it the legend revives. After one storm in 1992, a local family walking the beach finds a chain of gold, links fused by pressure. After another storm in 2001, a boy kicks at the sand and uncovers a handful of coins, their markings clear as the day they were struck. Each storm reminds the world that the treasure is real, but also that it remains incomplete, and the incomplete is what haunts most. Because after decades of recovery, after museums display reliquaries and collectors boast of private vaults, the numbers still don't match. The fleet carried more than any convoy in history. What has been found, though dazzling, is only a fraction. The rest remains below, or somewhere else. You stand on a beach in the present day. Tourists stroll unaware of the weight beneath their feet. Children build castles where bodies once washed ashore. The surf rolls endlessly, concealing centuries. But if you look closely, if you dig with your hand, you might uncover a coin, a link, a fragment, a whisper from 1715, reminding you that the story is not over. And just when you think modern science has closed the mystery, another detail emerges. Divers with advanced gear record sudden drops in pressure. Lights flickering though batteries are full. Cameras capture blurred shapes at the edge of frames. Outlines that resemble not coral, not reef, but walls. One diver, interviewed off record, admits he saw a doorway, iron-bound, embedded in stone, half buried in sand. He refuses to speak again. His team denies it. But his eyes in the interview tell another story. Still, the truth refuses to surface. Even now in the 21st century, with satellites overhead and sonar below, The sea keeps its silence. Each discovery feeds the legend, not ends it. The treasure is real, the artifacts are real. The disaster was real. But the whole truth, how 6 ships vanished, why so little remains, what else lies with them, remains unanswered. And as the sun sets on the same horizon those galleons once chased, you realize something unsettling. Technology can scan. Divers can recover. Museums can display, but the silence that has lasted 3 centuries has not broken. The sea has given fragments, but never the whole. And if fragments are all it allows, perhaps that is not by chance. Perhaps the rest was never meant to return. You begin in the present where history and myth collide. The Florida coast looks ordinary. Sunlight on white sand, waves rolling in predictable rhythm. Tourists with cameras and sunscreen. Yet beneath this calm lies a story that has refused to end for 3 centuries. The fleet of 1715 remains not only a tragedy of ships and men, but a mystery that keeps pulling the living closer, demanding attention, refusing silence. You can imagine walking those same beaches after a storm. Children dig trenches for fun, but in one trench a coin gleams. It is old, stamped with the mark of New Spain, worn but unmistakable. The child's laughter turns to shock. Adults gather, whisper, search. Soon others arrive with metal detectors, digging feverishly, hoping the sea has loosened more. A single coin is enough to spark obsession, because if one survived the waves, why not hundreds? Why not thousands? Modern treasure hunters live by this cycle. Each storm is an invitation, each find a promise. They speak of the Queen's jewels. Emeralds the size of grapes, a diamond cross lost with the flagship, relics of immense value. Some have been found, displayed in glass cases under bright museum lights. Others remain stories waiting in the dark. And with every fragment recovered, the larger absence grows heavier, because the numbers never align. Historians calculate what the convoy carried. The Crown's ledgers list ton after ton of silver. Chest after chest of gold, gem after gem packed into crates. What has been found accounts for only a fraction. Even after decades of modern recovery, the greater part remains missing. The question is not whether the treasure was real, it was. The question is why so little has returned. And just when you think the answer is only greed or storms, the stranger details return. Divers with modern gear describe caverns that appear and vanish. Currents that drag sideways instead of down. Shadows that shift when no one moves. Sonar scans reveal outlines too symmetrical to dismiss yet impossible to verify. Photographs blur at the edges, showing shapes that resemble walls, arches, even doorways. Some dismiss them as tricks of light, distortions in water. Others are not so sure. You imagine descending with them, light strapped to your mask, the green water thickening into black. Your beam lands on stone, smooth and deliberate, where no natural stone should be. You reach out, fingers brushing the surface. For a moment you are certain you feel not rock, but design. And then the current surges, pulling you back, tearing the truth away before you can grasp it. What would you believe? That the fleet was scattered by storms alone, or that it was taken whole by something we still do not understand? Still, the sea does not surrender its secret. The families of the lost never received closure. The governor's reports are incomplete. The church's warnings remain buried in journals. Modern divers continue to search and collectors continue to hoard what they find. Yet the silence endures. Each new discovery adds weight, not clarity. The fleet of 1715 has become more than ships, more than treasure. It has become a riddle written in water. And just when you think the story has reached its end, you realize it has only circled back. Because the sea still gives fragments. Coins wash ashore after every hurricane. Jewelry appears in nets. Relics surface in tidal pools. Enough to prove the fleet's ghost is real. Never enough to explain it. Centuries of searchers and still the ledger does not balance. The treasure is real, but the truth remains hidden. You stand on the beach at night, waves whispering against the shore. The stars stretch overhead. The same stars the sailors of 1715 watched on their last night alive. You listen to the surf and hear only silence. But in that silence there is weight. The weight of unanswered questions, of lives erased, of secrets withheld. So you ask yourself, was the fleet destroyed by storm, stolen by men, or swallowed by something darker? The answer may never surface, and maybe that is the point. Because some stories are not meant to end. They linger half-revealed, half-concealed, keeping the living hooked to the past. The fleet of 1715 is one of those stories. More legend than ledger, more silence than record, more haunting than history. And tonight, as you close your eyes, you realize the most terrifying truth is not that 6 ships vanished. It is that 3 centuries later they have not returned. So what do you believe? A state secret or a supernatural curse? Tell us in the comments. Some stories were never meant to stay buried. Don't let them vanish. Keep them alive with us.